Hello, my friends. Today I want to talk to you about a topic that's not talked a lot about in church services, I think. It's probably because it's too graphic at times. And for this reason, I would encourage some of you to use some viewer discretion because the topic that I want to talk about today is, what does the Bible tell us about abortion? And I think in some cases it's pretty easy to answer this question. But the other thing I'd like to discuss a little bit is maybe how God feels about it. And I think it's pretty evident from what we read in the Bible. So anyhow, let's get started. I think the easiest way to answer this question would be the sixth commandment. In Exodus chapter 20, we read about the sixth commandment. It says, "Thou shalt not kill." And that is probably the simple answer. But there's a lot of stories in the Bible, and there was even times when God's people were encouraged to kill their babies. And I'd like to share with you a story about that. In Exodus, we read about the children of Israel, and there was a big problem that the new king was seeing, and they were afraid because the Hebrews were beginning to have a huge number of people, and they said the children of Israel are more and mightier than we are. And they started being cruel with the task that they were having them do. And then in the 15th verse, we read about a commandment that happened. It says, "The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew wives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see a baby that is a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, let her live." The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." And I think it's pretty evident that there was a culture that early on that killing a baby was not part of God's plan. And so then Pharaoh changes his plan. He says, "Then Pharaoh gave the order to all his people, every Hebrew boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live." And so we read about a very special event. We, of course, know the story that happens in chapter 2. Moses is born, and he's placed in the river, and he's rescued, of course. It's hard for me to comprehend the anguish that was going through Moses' mother. And I also can't imagine what would have happened if Moses hadn't lived. And imagine if Moses' mother was pregnant and it was inconvenient. It's just mind-boggling if she chose to kill her son as the Egyptians had wanted. And it's really deep. So, anyhow, it's pretty obvious, at least from these verses, that God is able to make provision even in the most extreme cases where people are commanded to leave their sons in the river Nile. And so it reminds me that I should have faith also. And as Christians, we should have faith that if we're ever in an uncomfortable situation with a baby coming, that God can provide somehow. And so, anyways, the second thing I would like to talk about is a question that my son, we were talking about this a little bit, and he seemed to feel like, oh, it's okay to have an abortion if the woman is raped, or in the case of incest. And he brought up a very important point, and the thing I shared with him is that I told him that God never ever intended that woman should be in that situation. And I'd like to point out the ways that God tried to prevent all of those things from happening. And I know my faith has increased immensely when I really consider that. Did you know that the punishment for rape in the Old Testament was death? And the Jews were also taught, there's many verses in Deuteronomy and that explain that they were not allowed to see the nakedness of any family members. A father was not supposed to see his daughter naked. Well, of course, as a baby, it's fine, but uh, but there comes a time where it's not appropriate, and the son was not to see his mother or his aunt or his brother or sister naked, and of course, that was to prevent desire to commit incest. And so there were all these laws in place to prevent an unwanted baby from being created, and to prevent those situations of rape and incest. And I'm also amused by the fact that the Jewish women were supposed to be virgins at marriage. And you might wonder, well, why? Well, isn't it obvious? So that they wouldn't accidentally get pregnant before marriage and have to be dealing with this dilemma that's so common in the world today. The world doesn't seem to care. No, I'll just have an abortion. That'll take care of it. Yeah. So, anyhow, in the days of the Jewish days, and it should be the culture that's practiced today with all Christians as well, is that when people get married, that the wife should and the husband should be virgins. And back in those days, the parents would have a cloth. It was called the tokens of her daughter's virginity. And when a man had sex with his wife for the first time, there was a cloth there that one of the parents would hold, and when the deflower would occur, blood would come from the woman's body, and the blood would be captured on that cloth, and that would prove to anyone that the daughter of this family was indeed a virgin when she got married. And that was to protect the integrity of that family in case anyone made the claim that she was not a virgin at marriage. And the parents would always have that in their safekeeping to prove the integrity of their family. And it turned out that if the woman wasn't found to be a virgin, she would be stoned to death. And so it's very clear that sex before marriage was something that was not supposed to happen, and it would end in death. And that is of course because our loving God doesn't want a baby to be created and then to have the woman have the desire to kill it. I mean, it just seems painfully obvious from these verses and the laws that were created that God did all that he could to prevent this situation from happening. And but it's bound to happen at some point. We're human beings after all. We've all broken the commandments at some point. What I'd like to share with you is a story. It's in a song that was sung by Randy Travis. It's called The Three Wooden Crosses. Please enjoy this and listen to the lyrics.
A farmer and a teacher, a hooker and a preacher, riding on a midnight bus bound for Mexico. One was headed for vacation, one for higher education, and two of them were searching for lost souls. That driver never ever saw the stop sign, and 18-wheelers can't stop on a dime. There are 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway. Why there's not 4 of them, heaven only knows. I guess it's not what you take when you leave this world behind you. It's what you leave behind you when you go. That farmer left to harvest a home and 80 acres, the faith and love for growing things in his young son's heart. And that teacher left her wisdom in the minds of lots of children, to give them all a better start. And that preacher whispered, can't you see the promised land, as he lay his bloodstained Bible in that hooker's hand. There are 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway. Why there's not 4 of them, heaven only knows. I guess it's not what you take when you leave this world behind you. It's what you leave behind you when you go. That's the story that our preacher told last Sunday, as he held that bloodstained Bible up for all of us to see. He said, bless the farmer and the teacher and the preacher who gave this Bible to my mama, who read it to me.
Now, did you catch that? Who gave it to my mama, who read it to me? I just really love that. And again, as in Moses' case, I just wonder what would have happened if she chose to end her pregnancy lots of women choose to do that. And in this case, this preacher would have never been here.
There are 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway. Why there's not 4 of them, now I guess we know. It's not what you take when you leave this world behind you. It's what you leave behind you when you go. There are 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway.
Such a beautiful song, and reminds us again that you never know what that child will become. And obviously, I'm sure there's cases where people become evil too, and that's a sad thing. But anyways, there's a thought also that, well, just maybe some women aren't religious or they don't believe in God. And what could be said to them, I guess, or how could you convince them that this abortion decision is just awful? Well, one of the things I want to share with you is this video here. I found it most astonishing, and I wish every boy and girl in high school could watch this testimony here.
Including as an associate professor of OBGYN at the Albany Medical College. And Dr. Levatino, we'll begin with you. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to get right to it. Second trimester D&E abortions performed between roughly 14 and 24 weeks of gestation. Your patient today is 17 years old. She's 22 weeks pregnant. Her baby is the length of your hand plus a couple of inches. And she's been feeling her baby kick for the last several weeks. But she's asleep on an operating.
Did you catch that? She's asleep on the operating table. What a shame. What a shame. If there were true justice, she would be forced to be awake, in my opinion. Let's read and see what happens. Or let's watch and see what happens.
Operating room table. You walk into that operating room scrubbed and gowned, and after removing laminaria, you introduce a suction catheter into the uterus. This is a 14 French suction catheter. If she were 12 weeks pregnant or less, basically the width of your hand or smaller, you could basically do the entire procedure with this. But babies this big don't fit through catheters this size. After suctioning the amniotic fluid out from around the baby, you introduce an instrument called a Sofer clamp. It's about 13 inches long. It's made of stainless steel. The business end of this clamp is about 2.5 inches long and 1/2 inch wide. There are rows of sharp teeth. This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go. A D&E procedure is a blind abortion, so picture yourself introducing this and grabbing anything you can blindly and pull, and I do mean hard, and out pops a leg about that big, which you put down on the table next to you. Reach in again, pull out an arm about the same length, which you put down on the table next to you. And use this instrument again and again to tear out the spine, the intestines, the heart, and lungs.
I just love the reaction to these two women here. And you can see that they're sickened by this testimony. And meanwhile, the woman is asleep. Doesn't have any idea of this incredible thing that she's having done. And the thing is that's interesting to me is that if we hire a hitman, like from the mafia, to go kill someone, that's a crime that can get capital punishment in many of the states that we live in. But yet a doctor has the freedom to kill a baby inside the womb in the most horrifying way by tearing up its leg. It gets worse.
Head in the baby that size is about the size of a large plum. Can't see it, but you pretty good idea you've got it if you've got your instrument around something and your fingers are spread about as far as they go. You know you did it right if you crush down on the instrument and white material runs out of the cervix. That was the baby's brains. Then you could pull out skull.
That's sickening, and I really wish that I wish there was a law that if a woman went through with this procedure, that they would have to sit and witness this procedure on another woman before they decide themselves that they would have this procedure done. And I think it would be one of the most eye-opening experiences. I want to continue with this story because there's a time in this life that this guy decides to stop doing abortions, and I think it's quite informative. So please continue. I know it's graphic and it's tough, but some of these things need to be heard.
Pieces. And you have a day like I had a lot of times, sometimes a little face comes back and stares back at you. Congratulations, you just successfully performed a second trimester D&E abortion. You just affirmed her right to choose.
Wonderful.
One more question, Dr. Levatino. Why did you end your practice of doing abortions?
Pay attention.
I did over 1,200 abortions over a 4-year period in private practice, not counting the ones that I did during my training. I met my wife during my first year of training at Albany Medical Center. We got married about a year later and found that we had an infertility problem. After years of failed infertility treatment and several years trying to adopt a child, we were blessed with adopting a little girl that we named Heather in August of 1978. As sometimes happens in those situations, my wife got pregnant the very next month, and we had 2 children 10 months apart. 2 months short of my daughter Heather's 6th birthday, she was killed in an auto accident and literally died in her arms in the back of an ambulance. Anyone who has children might think they have some idea of what that feels like, but unless you've been through it yourself, you have no idea whatsoever. I know people find it hard to believe, but what do you do after disaster? You bury your child and then you go back to your life. And I don't remember exactly how long it was after my daughter died that I showed up at Albany Medical Center OR number 9 to perform my first second trimester D&E abortion. I wasn't thinking of it as anything special. This was routine to me. But I reached in, literally pulled out an arm or leg and got sick. You know, earlier on I described stacking up body parts on the side of the table. It's not to, gross people out, to use a simple term. When you do an abortion, you need to keep inventory. You have to make sure you get 2 arms and 2 legs and all the pieces. If you don't, your patient's going to come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I soldiered on and finished that abortion. And I know it sounds, as I said, hard for people to believe, but I'm telling you straight up my experience. After over 1,200 abortions, first and second trimester up to 24 weeks and all the rest of it, and being very dedicated to it, for the first time in my life, I really looked at that pile of body parts on the side of the table. And I didn't see her wonderful right to choose, and I didn't see all the money I just made. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter. And
do you see the experience that God put in his life? He gave him a first-hand experience of what it was like to lose his own daughter, so that he could recognize the value of a life. It's truly one of the most eye-opening videos I've seen. And this video was put out by my Living Waters, and I would encourage you to watch the entire video. This was a testimony that was given to Congress, and it's very eye-opening, and it would be my wish that anyone that doesn't believe in God, fine, that's your free will. But before you have an abortion, I think you should be forced to witness what it's really about. And I'd just like to finish with a few things. And in chapter Genesis chapter 24, we read about the end times. I'd like to share that a little bit. Matthew 24, pardon me, because I gotta find that verses real quick. In verse 9, it says, then shall they deliver you to be afflicted, and they shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And I know what some of the things that we believe, it's something that causes the rest of the nations to hate us. And that's not easy. And then it says, and because of iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And then another verse it says, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And I think some of that tribulation, that the horrible things that happen, is kind of described. We think about the things that happened at Hamas in Israel a couple months ago, when those soldiers came and took people and raped them and killed babies and stuff. And that is just like nothing compared to what abortion doctors do daily. We read about that baby being torn to pieces. It's just hard for me to imagine that it would be okay with anybody. And I'd just like to finish with a verse, Jeremiah, right here, the first chapter of Jeremiah, verse 5. It says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And the truth is that God knows every human being before it's even placed in the womb. And God has a plan for every human being. And we saw that was the case for Moses. We saw that as the case with that in that song about the wooden crosses. And I just hope that these verses have been helpful to you. And I think it also reminds us that we are in the last days. And so it's time to get to know the Lord Jesus, if you haven't already. And it's time to get right with Him. And it's time to repent of our sins and to embrace His commandments. And I know I struggle myself. And I know I want to keep embracing them and keep learning, so that I can be with Him in a place where love is the king. Love is what's there instead of hate. And I hope you will be encouraged to see. Hope this has been helpful.